Hi everyone, and welcome to our channel. If you love emotional, meaningful stories that touch the heart, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Now sit back, relax, and let yourself be carried away by today's story. Austin by night wore a beauty that was both modern and wild. Glass buildings shimmered with light, nestled among centuries-old oak trees whispering in the breeze. On a quiet road near the edge of town stood a wooden bar called the Copper Note. No flashy sign, no blaring speakers. Yet it drew in those seeking something raw, something real. Emily Walker stepped inside in a simple white dress and elegant heels. She had just left an art exhibition with friends, but instead of following them to a posh rooftop lounge, she veered off in another direction. For some reason, she was tired of champagne flutes, fake laughter, and empty conversations. A warm guitar melody filled the room as she took a seat. On the small wooden stage, under soft yellow lights, a man in a dark plaid shirt and faded jeans sang, "I'd trade 1,000 gold rings for a porch swing and your smile." His voice was deep, slightly raspy, with the scent of southern soil and the echo of a Texas wind. Emily looked up, listening closely. He wasn't handsome in the polished, glossy way of the men she usually dated, but there was something in his gaze, calm, honest, that held her still. She turned to the waitress. "Who is he?" The girl smiled. "Jack Mitchell, part-time musician, full-time plumber, but he sings like a country star." Emily smiled softly and put down her wine glass. She hadn't expected her heart to stir like this. After the performance, when Jack stepped off the stage, Emily was already waiting. They started talking. At first about music, then books, then the little things they both loved. Autumn sunsets, the smell of cinnamon rolls in the morning, the crunch of dry leaves in the park. Jack didn't know who Emily was. She didn't tell him, and maybe that's what made the conversation feel light, unfiltered, real. As the bar was closing, Jack picked up his guitar and grinned. "Want to hear one last song? Just for you?" She nodded. The song had no title, Jack said. He'd written it the day before, about a girl lost in city lights, who found herself in the chords of a guitar in a quiet little bar. Emily sat there, breathless. They didn't say goodbye when she left, but as she stepped outside, she felt like a piece of her heart had stayed behind. From secret coffee dates to long walks by town lake or taco stands on street corners, their relationship grew quietly but deeply. Jack didn't drive a sports car or wear tailored suits, but he listened. He held her hand when she cried from stress. He brought her favorite pastry every morning before work. Emily, once courted by men chasing her family name, now felt truly loved. They didn't need to pretend. Then one day, 2 red lines appeared on a pregnancy test. Emily sat frozen in the bathroom, mind spinning. Jack's face flashed before her. The man she loved, the man her family would never accept. She knew what was coming would change everything. But deep inside, she had never been more certain of anything in her life. She would keep the baby. She would choose Jack. That morning, the Texas sun streamed through the window, golden and warm like honey. But inside the small apartment where Emily sat, the air felt heavy, like the whole sky was about to collapse. She held the pregnancy test in her hands. 2 clear red lines. There was no denying it. Emily gently placed a hand on her stomach, where a tiny life was quietly forming. She didn't regret it, but she was scared. Scared of how her father would react when he found out. Richard Walker, one of the most powerful real estate moguls in Austin, had built skyscrapers and controlled empires, but he could never accept that his only daughter had fallen in love with a plumber. Emily knew that if she stayed silent, things would only get harder. So that afternoon, she drove to the Walker family estate, where she had grown up surrounded by luxury, expectations, and a reputation to protect. Richard was seated in his reading room, next to his usual glass of bourbon and a mahogany desk polished to perfection. When he saw Emily walk in, he looked up, a faint crease forming on his brow. "It's been a while since you came by. Something wrong?" Emily sat down, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant, Dad." The glass froze in Richard's hand. Silence stretched long and thin. Emily went on, her voice steady but quiet. Jack and I were getting married. A heavy breath. Then Richard stood up abruptly, placing the glass on the table with a sharp clink. Jack Mitchell? That plumber. Emily nodded. I love him. He's a good man. He doesn't have money, yes, but no money, no background, no status. Richard's voice rose. Do you even understand what you're doing, Emily? You're throwing away your future, our family's name, for a blue-collar nobody. No, Dad, I'm not throwing anything away, Emily said firmly. I'm choosing what feels right in my heart. Richard let out a cold laugh, his steel-gray eyes narrowing. If you walk out of this house to be with him, don't ever come back. Emily stood, tears glistening, but her gaze unwavering. Then I'll go, because I won't live a life where even love has to meet a pedigree. The front doors of the estate shut behind her like a chapter slamming closed. Emily drove across the city to the construction site where Jack was working. When he saw her approaching, eyes red and trembling, he rushed over. She collapsed into his arms, holding him tightly as if afraid he might vanish. I'm pregnant. My father, he disowned me. Jack froze, but he didn't say a word of blame. He simply held her tighter and whispered, You won't regret this. I promise. They held a small wedding in the fall, under an old oak tree in a friend's backyard. No diseñadores, no grand guest list, just love, honesty, and sunlight filtering through the leaves. Jack rented a modest apartment near downtown. He picked up extra jobs, even giving up his passion for music to support his wife and the child growing inside her. Emily, though pregnant, worked part-time at a local bookstore. Their days were filled with instant noodles, secondhand furniture, and early morning bus rides. But none of it mattered, because every time Jack placed a hand on her belly and said, We're going to be okay, Emily, she believed him, because real happiness doesn't need to be covered in gold. Life after marriage wasn't easy for Emily and Jack. There were no more sunlit mornings in the Walker Estate's spacious bedroom, no breakfast trays delivered with fresh coffee. Instead, there was a two-room apartment with a leaky ceiling when it rained and the constant noise of traffic echoing up from the street below. But none of that ever made Emily regret her choice, because every morning she woke to Jack quietly making breakfast, toast, scrambled eggs, and that warm, familiar smile. Jack worked tirelessly. At first, he took a full-time job as a plumber with a residential maintenance company. Then he picked up side jobs after hours, fixing electrical systems, painting walls, even hauling furniture on weekends. His hands, once used to strumming smooth melodies on a guitar, were now rough, cracked, and calloused. But every night, he would place his hand gently on Emily's growing belly and ask, Did the baby kick today? Emily would smile, placing his hand more firmly on her stomach and whisper, He's listening to your voice. Some nights, no matter how exhausted he was, Jack would pull out his old guitar, the only thing left from his youth, and sing lullabies to both Emily and the unborn child. By her 8th month of pregnancy, Emily had to stop working due to fatigue and health issues. All financial burdens fell on Jack's shoulders, but he never once complained. They stretched every dollar, groceries from discount markets, no unnecessary spending, and instead of using ride shares, Jack would pedal a second-hand bike, carrying Emily to her prenatal checkups with a blanket in the back seat to cushion her. One rainy evening, as they sat sharing popcorn under the warm yellow light of their old lamp, Emily quietly said, I'm sorry I brought you into this hard life. Jack paused, then looked her straight in the eyes. Emily, if I could choose again, I'd still choose you, because you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Then, Noah was born on a crisp spring morning in the modest delivery room of a local hospital. Emily cried from pain. Jack cried from joy. When they placed the tiny baby into Emily's arms, Jack stood silently, unable to speak. He looked at his son and whispered a promise. I'll never let you go without. I'll do whatever it takes. From then on, their new rhythm began. Sleepless nights with Noah's cries, days of Emily learning how to change diapers, make formula, and rock her son to sleep. It wasn't glamorous, but it was full of love. They had no luxury, but they had each other. And to Emily, that was enough to call happiness. The class reunion took place on a bright Saturday afternoon. Emily stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her light pink lipstick. She wore a simple beige dress, elegant but modest, and an old pair of heels that had seen better days. Her hair was tied in a loose bun at the nape of her neck, tidy but plain. No one knew how long she had hesitated before deciding to go. Her old friends mostly came from wealthy backgrounds. Many were now CEOs, doctors, lawyers, models, or married to men with high-profile careers. Emily, now a stay-at-home mom, living in a small rental apartment with a plumber husband, felt worlds away from the glittering circles she once belonged to. The restaurant hosting the reunion was located in the heart of downtown Austin, on the top floor of a luxury hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows, warm golden lighting, white linen-covered tables adorned with crystal vases of red roses. Everything screamed sophistication. Emily stepped in with a soft smile, hiding the anxiety behind her calm appearance. Her classmates greeted her with polite hugs and cheerful greetings, but there was something in their glances, the subtle notice of her worn-out handbag, her non-designer dress, that she couldn't ignore. Lunch was served with wine, gourmet dishes, and self-congratulatory stories. My husband just opened a branch in New York. We're going to Greece next month. The kids are so excited. Emily just smiled, listening quietly. She carefully avoided mentioning Jack, not because she was ashamed of him, but because she feared the patronizing looks and empty sympathies. That happened. While everyone was chatting by the window, someone suddenly pointed down to the street below. "Oh my God, look at that!" "Seriously? A plumber walking by a place like this?" The group leaned in to look. Jack, wearing his red work uniform, a heavy tool bag over his shoulder, sweat glistening on his brow. He was hurrying past on the sidewalk, probably heading to a nearby job. At that exact moment, Jack looked up, his eyes naturally drawn to the restaurant's tall glass windows. Emily froze. Reflexively, she turned her face away, lowered her head, and gripped her glass of water. She didn't want him to see her. Her friends laughed. "Yikes, he looks like he came straight from a junkyard. Who let someone like that near a place this classy?" Emily said nothing. Her ears burned, her heart pounded. A wave of heat rushed to her face, then turned to a cold numbness. It felt like the world was squeezing the air out of her chest. The lunch eventually ended, but Emily couldn't remember what she'd eaten. All she could recall was the image of Jack, that kind face, that gentle gaze, and how she had looked away. That night, back in their small apartment, Jack was sitting with Noah in his lap, softly humming a lullaby. He looked up and smiled when she walked in. "You're home early. Tired?" Emily didn't answer. She sat down next to him, watching their baby sleep peacefully in his father's arms. She gently reached out and touched Jack's rough, calloused hand. "I saw you walking past a restaurant today. I don't think you noticed me." Jack paused for a moment, then nodded with a smile. "I did, but you were enjoying yourself with your friends. I didn't want to interrupt." Emily looked down, her eyes stinging. She didn't have the courage to say she had deliberately turned away. "I am sorry." Jack replied softly. "For what? You don't owe anyone an apology. You're my wife. You're Noah's mom. That's all that matters to me." Emily leaned into him, tears slipping down her cheek onto his shoulder. She knew then, no matter how many dazzling lights existed outside, no matter how many mocking whispers, in this man's arms was the only place she truly felt loved. It started raining around 8 p.m. The drops were light at first, but quickly thickened, drumming steadily against the windows of the third-floor apartment where Emily was rocking Noah to sleep. Jack was working the night shift, a last-minute assignment at a construction site in the outskirts of Austin. He had just landed a better-paying contract and promised he'd be back late. As always, Emily kissed him goodbye, though a quiet unease lingered in her chest. The rain poured harder. Just before 9 p.m., Noah stirred, then let out a piercing cry. Emily rushed over. His little face was flushed red, and when she touched his forehead, her heart skipped a beat. He was burning up. She grabbed the thermometer, nearly 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius. The fever had come like a storm, unannounced, merciless, and sudden. Noah wailed, his body trembling. Emily's hands shook as she dialed Jack, and after several failed attempts through poor reception, she finally got through. Noah has a high fever. It's really bad, Jack. Jack's voice came through, mixed with the roar of wind and distant machinery. I'm an hour out at least. I can't leave right now. Call a taxi. I'll meet you at the hospital as soon as I can. Emily threw a blanket over Noah, grabbed her raincoat, and ran out into the storm. She stood at the edge of the road, soaked, waving desperately at every passing car. But no one stopped. It was dark, the rain relentless. No rideshare drivers wanted to pick up a drenched woman clutching a crying baby at night. Emily felt tears blend with the rain as she held Noah tighter, his breathing growing fainter, his body limp. She whispered through chattering lips, "Please, someone, please help us." At that moment, a sleek black SUV pulled to a stop in front of her. The window rolled down. Bathed in soft yellow interior light, the driver's face became clear. Ethan Brooks. Ethan, her former college classmate, and once the ideal suitor her father had envisioned for her. Still impeccably dressed, composed, and sharp-eyed. But when he saw her, soaked to the bone, holding a feverish baby, something in his expression softened. Emily, she couldn't speak, only nodded, holding Noah tightly. Without hesitation, Ethan opened the passenger door. "Get in. Let's go." Inside the warm car, Emily cradled Noah, trembling. Ethan took off his jacket and gently wrapped it around the baby. He didn't ask questions. He just drove, fast and focused, through the pouring rain. At the emergency room of the nearest private hospital, Emily began digging through her purse. But her wallet was still at home. She only had a few small bills. I don't have enough to cover this." Ethan stepped to the front desk, pulled out his wallet, and laid down his credit card. "Treat the baby first. I'll cover it." Emily stood still, overwhelmed. Gratitude, guilt, and shame tangled inside her. Not because Ethan paid, but because the man beside her wasn't Jack. While Noah was taken into the treatment room, Emily sank into a waiting room chair, her hair soaked, her hands cold. Ethan handed her a cup of warm water and sat beside her. After a moment of silence, he spoke gently. "You're not the same Emily from college. No more fire in your eyes. No more air of a spoiled princess." She didn't respond, eyes fixed on the ER door. He continued, "But now you have something else, a beauty that comes from sacrifice, from love, from fighting for your family with everything you've got." Emily began to cry, not from fear, not from pain, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone truly saw her. Noah's diagnosis was a simple viral fever. Nothing critical, just fluids, medication, and overnight observation. Emily sighed in relief. Just then, Jack arrived, his shirt still damp with sweat, work boots caked with dust. He had driven straight from the site, breathless. He saw Emily holding Noah and Ethan standing a short distance away. There were no introductions, only a silent nod from Ethan. Emily turned to look at Jack, and in his eyes, she saw something she hadn't realized she'd been longing for all night. Home. News that his grandson had been hospitalized with a high fever didn't take long to reach Richard Walker. Though he kept up his cold, dignified facade, the heart of a father and a grandfather couldn't help but stir. The next day, as Emily sat by Noah's hospital crib, the door to the waiting room swung open. Richard entered in a charcoal gray suit, impeccable as always, but with a stern, unreadable look in his eyes. Behind him was his assistant, holding a pristine white envelope. Emily stood up, surprised and unsure. Richard didn't look at Noah. He didn't embrace his daughter. He simply looked her in the eye and said in a clipped tone, "I heard Ethan covered the hospital expenses. Here's the exact amount. Return it to him." Emily opened her mouth to speak, but he placed the envelope on the table and turned to his assistant. "Call Ethan. Tell him to come to my office this afternoon. I'll handle it personally." Then Richard's eyes scanned the room and landed on Jack as he entered. Jack had just come straight from work, his clothes still dusty, sweat soaking through his worn red uniform. The tension in the room was suffocating. Richard's voice tightened. "So you finally show up." Jack met his gaze calmly, without flinching. "Yes, sir. I came as soon as I could. Richard let out a cold laugh. Work? Ah, yes. The kind of job that leaves my daughter living in a rundown apartment, with my grandson in the hospital and no money to pay the bill. Emily bristled. Dad, that's enough. But Richard cut her off with a wave of his hand. He didn't even look at her. Instead, he stepped directly toward Jack. Do you even understand who Emily is? She's my daughter. A Walker. She had everything. A prestigious education, a promising future, respect. And you? You're what? A plumber? You drag her from everything she was and dumped her into your little muddy world? Jack didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't defend himself. Emily opened her mouth, but Jack gently placed a hand over hers, shaking his head slightly. Then he looked at Richard, not with anger, but with something deeper, sadness. You're right. I'm not wealthy. I have no legacy to pass down, no degrees hanging on the wall. All I have are these hands and a heart. And this heart knows only one thing: how to protect this family, no matter the cost. Richard froze. It wasn't the strength of Jack's words that struck him. It was their sincerity. Emily stood silent. She looked at the two men. One, her father, a man of power and pride. The other, her husband, with roughened hands and a kind soul. And then, as if every fiber of her being had already chosen long ago, she lifted her chin and said clearly, Dad, if you can't accept Jack, then at least respect my choice. I don't need a man with money to be happy. I just need someone who loves me and our son. Richard didn't speak. For the first time, he truly looked into his daughter's eyes, not to judge, but to truly see. And what he saw wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a woman, a mother, and someone who had learned what it truly means to love. After that tense confrontation, things between Emily and her father remained cold. Richard didn't visit the small apartment she shared with Jack. He didn't call either. But Emily knew, deep down, something had shifted. As for Jack, life moved forward. He continued his daily work at the construction sites, climbing ladders, inspecting pipelines, carrying the same calloused hand across rooftops and basements, never complaining, always giving everything he had for Emily and Noah. Then one day, luck, or rather, years of relentless hard work, finally arrived. At a large-scale residential project in North Austin, where Jack had recently been promoted to site supervisor, he discovered a serious design flaw in the basement wastewater system. If left unchecked, it could have caused major structural damage and losses worth millions. Jack immediately reported it, redrafted the entire corrected plan, and submitted it directly to the project director. At first, no one believed that a former plumber could grasp such detailed technical issues. But after thorough review, the entire board of engineers had to admit Jack had prevented a disaster. A week later, Jack was invited to the headquarters of the construction firm, where he was officially offered the position of lead field engineer, with a salary 3 times his current earnings. For the first time, Jack walked confidently into a downtown office, signing papers not because of his background, but because of his merit. When Emily heard the news, she cried. Not because of the money, but because, at last, all the hardship Jack had endured was being seen, honored, and valued. A week later, Jack was invited to attend the Outstanding Field Engineer of the Year award ceremony, held at a 5-star hotel in Austin. Ironically, it was the same hotel where Emily's awkward class reunion had taken place months earlier. Emily stood beside Jack, holding his hand tightly. She wore a light blue dress, nothing extravagant, but her eyes sparkled brighter than any diamond in the room. The person they least expected to see was Richard Walker. He arrived quietly, standing at the back of the hall. No words, no expression, but his gaze followed Jack as he walked on stage to receive his award. And in that look, there was something new, acknowledgement. When the ceremony ended, Richard approached Emily. For the first time in months, he embraced his daughter gently, then knelt to look at Noah, who giggled in Jack's arms. Richard stood back up and looked at Jack. Then he said quietly, I don't know what it took for you to get here, but thank you. Thank you for not walking away from my daughter, and for becoming a better man than I ever gave you credit for. Jack said nothing. He didn't need to. Their eyes met, no longer clashing, but understanding. Respect. That evening, in their small but warm apartment, Emily sat between Jack and Noah, the soft glow of the lamp lighting her peaceful face. She knew life would still bring its challenges. But now, they were no longer alone. Love had been tested. Pride had learned to yield to kindness. And trust, even if late, was the most precious gift this family could ever give each other. They had survived it all. And in the end, they had each other.